just to let you know. You find the right piece of paper here. In the year ending 10/31/17, we have an operating income this last year of $9,146. $5,000 of that was one donation. So you know. And our expenses were $3,799. The archives had an income of $5,555, and they spent $8,838. But that was because part of that was gotten in an award last year, and they hadn't spent it until this year. So they got a grant from the Tribute Garden for 2 different pieces of furniture that are archival, so that they can put things in it and they'll keep safe. For our budget for this next year, we project that our total expenses will be $3,625, and from dues, we usually get about $2,600. So from dues and our operating expenses, we're about 1,000 short. So we make that up in different ways. We sell in books with donations and other things we're planning on trying to sell. Okay? Any questions on the treasurer's report? Jim's not here, and so I'm kind of filling in for it. The other thing we have to do tonight is nominate officers and board members. 4 board members come up, expire every 3 years, and 2 officers every other year. So this year it's the president and secretary, and then 4 board members. Robert is chairman of the nominating committee this year. He's our vice president, so he's going to make a report.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So we've got 2 officer positions up. That's Diane, who's president, and Allison, who's secretary. And they have very graciously agreed to stay on. And as far as I know, no one is challenging them, at least yet. Diane said we normally have 4 board positions open every year. This year we have 5 because there's 3 resignations from the board. So Robin Capers, who's been on the board for a while, she's moving, so she's stepping down. And then Irene Wing and Fanny Manzi have been on the board as well. They're stepping down. We also have 2 current board members who have agreed to stay on. So that's Linda, right, back with the video camera, and Joe Magnorella, who I don't think I saw. He's here. He's agreed to stay on. So that means we have 3 open spots. One of these, I'm excited to say, we've got candidate for Jonathan Boyce back here. A lot about Millbrook history, cares a lot about Millbrook history, so he's going to be a great addition. And then we'll have kind of 2 empty spots for a little while. We've got some ideas about how to fill them and some candidates, but we haven't sorted all that out yet completely. We hope to figure that out by the next meeting in January. So there's no competitive elections here, so we don't have to have a formal vote. So I think what I'm going to do is just ask Allison as the secretary.
Are there any nominations from the floor?
Anyone have any other nominations?
From the floor.
Anybody want to challenge Diane? Or
Anybody want to serve on the board?
So seeing no hands, yes.
I move nominations be closed, Secretary Castleman ballot.
Anyone want to second that?
Second.
Okay, let's get it going here, all right? Let's give John credit for that. So Allison, would you do that? And then I think we're set with that part of the
All in favor, say aye.
You all want to vote? All right, everybody want to vote?
Aye.
Aye. There we go. Any nays? All right. Carries.
The other thing we have to vote on tonight are the new bylaws. We've been working on those for about a year, over a year. We actually went through and got them from the Dutchess County Historical Society and rewrote them from theirs, taking them from theirs. because theirs were written by a lawyer and we figured that they knew more than we did. We put them around town, as we told everybody, so that anybody can go and review them and read them and comment on them. And now everybody's had a chance to do that. We need the general membership to vote to accept the new bylaws. So, can I have a motion from the floor?
Make a motion to accept it, that's rewritten.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. And Allison, can you give us a short rundown of the programs that we have for next year for the program committee? So you have just a short one.
It'll be short, it's very short.
So we can get on with
The program card that you'll be receiving will be, well, the January mailing, you should receive a program card, the cards we send out. It's here ready to be printed up, and we have 10 programs this year, as we did last year, but we typically have 9, because we are hosting one of the Dutchess County tavern tours again this year. Last year it was at Charlotte's, this year it'll be at Moore's Kitchen on Alden Place. And the theme of the county is World War I this year for the anniversary of World War I, the Great War. And so a number of our programs focus on World War I here in Millbrook. So there'll be programs that are really homegrown here and all about life in Millbrook. And 2 of the programs will focus a bit on Hogan's Alley, the Italian experience, and World War I. Another fun program we're having is the Golden Age of Radio, so you all have to watch for that. That's going to be in May. We have an individual coming in to talk about that and programs through the ages of radio. And our annual tea this year will be at Millbrook School, at the mill, a newly renovated mill, so it's a very special place. And we have other programs going on, but I'll let it go. And that.
Our January program is being put on by, or will be, a speaker from the FDR library, and it's going to be on hobos and Hoovervilles, and during the Depression, and actually going into the code of conduct that they had to maintain, and they were expected to maintain as they traveled all over the country on in the trains, and on however they went, so. All right, without further ado, I'm gonna turn this over to Robert now, and he can start our program.
All right, so I'll ask the Kadings to come up front here. We got seats for you.
Uncle Henry, get up there.
Shows the seat farthest away then. So thanks again for coming, everyone. I'm really excited about this program because I can't think of better people to have talk about the history of Millbrook over the last, 80 years?
90 years.
90 years. So I'm sure our 3 guests here probably don't need an introduction, but of course, starting farthest away from me, right, we have Henry, Helen, right, and John Kading. So I'll just start by asking, how did your family first get to this area? John, you want to take that?
Well, I suppose I better stand up. And I, being the oldest, I suppose I gotta give you the thing. I wanted first, the most interesting, is a picture of my father. And I will pass on to you, if anything was drilled into our head when we were kids. Family, family, family. And I will start this talk about coming to America I simply sang family, family, family. And I go back to my brother
Over there.
right here in 1947. He had the grand champion steer at the Eastern States Exposition. Sold that land, sold that steer for $1.95 a pound. It weighed over 1,000 some pounds, which was the first money that we ever had, or that much. And we had it in the bank. Then my cousin, who had a machine shop in New York, came up with an invention of a knitting machine. Now, they didn't have no knitting machine, and he wanted to patent that, but it takes money. He asked Henry for the thing, well, he asked my father. And then my father went to Henry, can we borrow that money to give it to cousin Henry? Yeah, why not? So he paid us back within a year or two, whatever it was. Then we go on a little bit further, in the 1947, when I graduated from high school, I had the opportunity to buy in the inventory of the Corner News. And again, I went back to Henry. Henry said, yeah, I paid him back. But that's the way it worked. My cousin had a deli in New York, in Poughkeepsie. And they wanted to buy the business. After I paid my money back, they opened up the deli in Poughkeepsie, and they had that thing for about 10 years, 8 or 10 years. And then he died. That was very unfortunate. And I think that ended. And then Henry gets married and buys house. Anyway, I don't want to take any much longer.
But Henry, your parents were born in Germany, right?
Yes, well, that's what I'm going to get to
Oh,
right now. This book, right here, J. Russell.
Jay Russell.
Jay did this in 19, when he was still in school, portrait of Ernest Kading, German.
Henry, when,
Yeah, I just had to write it, it was a political, I don't know, it was some kind of science at just somewhere around 1980. And I wrote about my grandfather. They wanted us to interview an immigrant, or tell a story of an immigrant, and that's what I did. I wrote this story about my grandfather.
Thank you.
and he had a wonderful mother that had everything organized to do that report. Thank you, Aunt Helen.
Well, what's interesting, my father, number one, he was the youngest of 10 children. That's a good start, right? So he grew up, and he went to school,
Read
and
the way it
and
is.
6 years old, and got out when he was 14 years old. And when you get to be 14, they have a choice, either to go on to higher education or to a trade school. Well, my father took on the machinist trade. And he went for 2 years, and then got a job as a setup man, like International Harvester, for example. They had the Deutsche Werke, which was the biggest factory in all through Europe.
Excuse me, is your father in Germany right now when you're telling us this?
My father died in 1970.
No, when this is, yes,
Yes.
He was in Germany when he went to trade school.
yes.
So anyway, I can read this here, the way the report is, and then well, anyway, all right, I'll read this. 3 years later, you graduated in 1921 from the trade school, and that was a printing school. You finished schooling, working approximately 3 years in various machines factories. Then he got laid off. And he went out for another job, and he got laid off of that one. And then meanwhile, my father's sister and her husband, they moved from Wingdale, or moved from Germany, and went to Wingdale, where they rented a dairy farm. And my father, she kept writing letters back to my father and telling him how wonderful it is in America and the opportunities there. You can go to a tree and just pick up the dollar bills off the tree. But that's the kind of thing they did for years. Well, anyway, my father got engaged to my mother. And
Count got drunk on Herman. His sister Marietta and brother-in-law Herman had moved to America a few years earlier. In order for an immigrant to come over to America, a sponsor had to be able to support the person. Ernest was sponsored by his brother-in-law, Herman Remnitz. On July 25th, 1925, Ernest sailed on a ship to America, leaving behind his fiancée, Charlotte. The voyage took about seven days. There were approximately 200 passengers on the ship named Hamburg. The ship docked in New York City, and there Herman was waiting for him. After passing customs inspection, they took a train to Wingdale, New York, where Herman owned a small farm. Ernest worked on Herman's farm for a year, getting little pay, mainly his room and board. Having established himself in the United States, he then sent for his fiancée, Charlotte Bush, P-U-S-C-H. She had a problem with that. They told her that was her name. I don't know, the doors, Bush.
Very fast. It starts. That was my first impression.
So did Helen and Henry, did you grow up speaking German too, or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you still speak German?
Yes.
We
The
went to
wonderful
Germany in
part is, I
1980.
will tell you this, at the first thing when I had all this problem with speaking English, the war comes, and I'm a German, I'm a Nazi, and I tell you, you talk about bullying, I was bullied to no end, because they all knew that I was German, and that was a bad sign. That went all the way through.
Yeah, and you told me before, right, about during the war, you're what, 13, 14 years old at that point? You guys are a little younger. That people came to your house.
The FBI, they came to inspect the house because there were 3 German families on that estate, and they wanted to come in and do an inspection. Well, they came in our house first. I don't know why, but because we found out later that the 3 guys went to the other 2 houses. They just took a look in the door and said, "You're okay." But boy, they gave us a hard time. When I say give you a hard time, my father invited them in. And they came in looking, "Oh, you've got a shortwave radio here. Oh, my God, you know that, you shouldn't have that. What, you listen to it?" "Oh, yeah," my father said. "On Saturday nights, we have the parties that they have in Germany, you know, and they sing all these German songs and, oh, just wonderful." But then, he looks over on the shelf and there's my box camera on the shelf. "Oh, you got a camera?" Oh, you're not supposed to have a camera. Your wife is not a citizen, and she shouldn't be. We could take her to jail. And my father says, what? You're gonna take my wife because my son has that camera? That's my son's camera, not mine. That's my son's. And he said, before you take it, I'll stop it in the ground, and then you can take it. All right, so, and then he says, okay, but, when my father said, if you're gonna take my wife, you take your family. We're 5 people, and you're gonna take my wife is sickly, we go to the doctor almost every week. You gotta go to the doctor, she's not healthy. Well, we don't want that. And he said, we don't want it. So he didn't, so he left that alone, and never had any more problems.
So Helen and Henry, what are your memories of time during
My
World War
memory
II?
of school was having milk and graham cracker every morning.
As a teacher, I can say that that's probably what my students remember too, like what they have for lunch. Anything that
And
happens in
also,
class.
I made a picture of my drawing, I'm not a artist, but it said primary school, and they had little kids in the window, and they put it in the hallway on the bulletin board. I was so proud every time I looked at that. I got a picture.
Do you still have it? What happened to it?
I saved it.
You got everything.
I'm not a hoarder, but I saved it.
Henry, what are your memories of World War II? What was your experience there? How old are you? You're 8 or 9? How old are you?
Yeah, I was about 8 or 9. I can remember up here at the school, primary school, they had a lot of drills, you know, and we used, as little kids, we all had to go down the cellar up here in the school, and we sat there quietly, and then they would blast one big blast on the fire whistle, and we could all come up. But then I remember nights too, the whistle would go out, and we were supposed to turn all the lights down to very low. I remember a lot of times the army would come down from, I think from Massachusetts, they were coming through, and they would camp at Thorndale.
Yes.
All the army stuff that they had, and that was a big thing. Our headlights on the cars was all blacked out, half of the headlight was blacked out, like that. And then we had the little coop up on top where the school is now, the St. Joseph's School. There was a lookout up there. A guy was up there all the time with the binoculars. That was all Millbrook.
So when the soldiers came to Thorndale, did you interact with them? You talked to them?
Yeah, we went down.
And my father says, you weren't taking any pictures.
While they're here.
Yeah. So when is it, John, that you buy the Corner News?
And when did I buy? I bought I was June 30th, 1947. And on June 30th, 1947, I was in Washington, D.C. on my senior trip. And again, my darling sister steps in for me on June 30th, 1947, to be there to take over the store. Because that was the day, I came home on July the 1st, and from that time on, I'm out. And in 1943, no, wait a minute, 1953, when I came out of the service in 1952, 1953, I had the opportunity, Mr. Dunn had bought the store. And I went to Mr. Dunn and said that I wanted to buy it. I'm back out of the service. I can now borrow on my GI Bill and so forth. And I bought the store for $27,000. Wow. Only because he had it on the market. It was gonna sell for 25. I went to Mr. Whalen, I said, Mr. Whalen, why can't I buy the corner news store? Oh, John, you know, Spot Latona wants to buy it. He offered 26,000 for it. And I said, well, then if he offers 26, I'll offer 27. Now, John, you gotta understand, we got 10%. We got, that's why we go back to Henry.
Another steer, the second steer we sold.
That was the nut in the whole thing. And, yeah, and that was basically how I got the store. And the crazy thing is, when I first took over in 1945 from Mr. Tilsley, he made up the lease. And the lease was supposed to be $75 a month, or 4% of the gross sales I do the previous month. And my father looked at that and said, John, you'll be working for him. The harder you're gonna work, the more you're gonna have to pay. So we ended up, I signed this thing, and we agreed on $75 a month.
Flat rate.
And that's how it started.
And how long did you have it, all told?
All told, 54 years.
Wow. So how many people here remember? That's impressive, right? So let's get the audience involved here. You guys, what are your memories of it? Skip, you wanna?
Roger Trent, I started Miller School in '48. And there was a guy who worked for my father, he had to pick up at Redmond Bridge, so I used to ride to Millbrook with him. And he'd go to the corner news store. Roger Trent and I used to take the papers to the post office, because they had a stamp who they went to. They had the post office to go out in the morning mail to the people out in the town.
So I missed out on this. I've only been here for 15 years. I never got to go to the corner news. Yeah, question.
I'm just interested, when the soldiers were camped out in Thorndale and your family was all together, did you speak German in front of the soldiers or only English?
No.
Only
We only spoke German to each other.
I see, okay, got it.
And the only thing I will pass on to you, as the years went by in the store, and people started to come in, and I could understand when they were talking about what a nice store you got here, and singing German. And I would go over and talk to them in German again, and ask them where they're from in Germany, and so forth, and tell them about my family, and so forth. But again, the thing is, I had my sister take over the store in 1953. 1950, when I was drafted, and I was stationed in Verdun, France. And the wonderful part, let me tell you, I was hoping to go to Germany, but Germany was nothing else. But they started a new headquarters in Verdun, France. And I was a typist in shorthand at the time, and they put me in Verdun, France. But the nice part about being in there, we had a 3-day pass every month. I got a 3-day pass. And every month that I had that pass, I went to see a cousin, or aunt, or uncle somewhere in Germany. I spent many a day, almost a day and a half sometimes, to go see my father's sister, for example, or a cousin of mine, you know, at that time. And they couldn't thank me enough, they couldn't do enough for me, because all during the war, starting in 1941, 42, we were sending care packages. And he said, if it wasn't for those care packages, I don't know if they would have lived through this.
He sent a picture of home, and I could see with my jumper shirt, all my dresses. interesting. What they wanted most of all was coffee.
What are your memories of the time when you were running the store? What do you remember from that period?
Go ahead, Al, tell them.
Tell them all the truth. When I came back, she threw the keys at me. I don't know.
Is that true?
And he came home, he'd come home for a few days, and he'd sleep in, and my father says, you get up. He says, your sister's been 2 years, she's been getting up, go open the store. You go open the store.
So probably everybody knows this, but, except me, but what was in the store? You had sold newspapers, but what else?
Let me tell you what the story is. Number one.
What was the number one
Yeah.
bestseller?
One of the things, we had magazines and newspapers. When I say we had newspapers, I sold 1,500 newspapers on a Sunday morning.
Wow.
That's a lot of people coming in and out. But the interesting thing about it,
Senior moments.
Film,
hey, you know, oh, God.
Biggest seller,
film,
what other
Daddy, you sold
items?
film.
Yes.
Cigars, cigarettes.
Cigars.
When I was putting my magazines out, and then we had the pocketbooks, which was going on, and here I get this book, How to Become Independent and Wealthy. I says, my God, and his name was Marvin Small. Now Marvin Small had a place over on the Turnpike, on 44, or 44. And he happened to just come in when I had the book and I was ready to put it out. I said, Mr. Small, I gotta read this book. He says, don't waste your time. Find a need and fill it. That was his advice to me. That was my first year of thing. And ever since then, when everybody came in and wanted something, well, I didn't have it, but I can get it. I was the first one to have a copy machine.
And a fax.
We have a copy
And a
machine.
fax machine.
And a fax machine.
Huh?
And one other thing, John, I must mention, my mother-in-law bought a sheepskin from you in that store. And I still have that sheepskin. I was going to bring all that. I was going to bring it tonight. And because a year ago, I mentioned that sheepskin to you, and you said, Frank, I'll card it for you. Well, carding is, taking the little, pulling it out. And he was willing to do that after how many years? But I still have that sheepskin, John, and every time I step on it, I think of you.
Frank, I got nervous. I thought you were gonna try to return it or something.
For a refill.
Yeah, can I say something? Since I'm a Kading clan here, the childhood of these guys were great parents. I mean, dad and mom, yeah, they were all right. Aunt Helen and her kids, Uncle Henry. As a child, Thorndale, we had Brook Meadowlark. The fishing hole of all fishing holes there. We had, even today, I'm out there pounding my post. Every once in a while, I have a smile come to my face of some of the things I used to do as kids with all my great cousins over there. And you guys raised some good kids.
Right.
Your parents stay on Thorndale? How long did you live on Thorndale?
I
your
lived
parents,
I lived in Thorndale until 1955 when I got married. That's when I left.
That's when you left, but when did your parents leave?
Oh, my parents left
They moved up to the,
68, isn't it? Something like
68, yeah.
68. It's in Jason's
And Oakland
Court.
became a crossing guard,
Yeah, we're gonna put
and,
that.
in the center of town for the kids, walking to school.
Yes, it's in
And
there.
lived above the store.
They lived there till 68.
Well, it got so bad, my father, he had arthritis in his hand. And he was in such pain. And I guess Mr. Morrison, who was the superintendent
Well, he must have been in his eighties by then. He was well in his eighties by then, right?
yes,
No, was it?
No, he isn't.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't.
He died?
anyway, he
I
was
wanna say 67.
Yeah, I think it's 68.
Yeah.
Dad, Opa died when he was
lived over
68.
the store at the corner news. And I enjoyed getting up in the morning.
It's in the report.
Report.
It's in the report.
I would get up there at 7 o'clock, but 6 o'clock.
So with the corner news, did you have people like Timothy Leary and Mary Tyler Moore? I mean,
God,
who was
yes,
coming in here?
yes.
Timothy Leary.
Do you remember those
Timothy
names?
Leary came in next door one.
Oh, yeah, Dad is Timothy Leary.
You
Dad.
know, when
I got a picture of
They
him.
come home.
So sure enough, he went down and got it and typed it up and gave it back to him. I don't remember what was in there, but
He had you type something up?
I typed the whole report or whatever it was, just 4 or 5 pages of it.
He had typists doing experimental work on LSD. And I know there's so many people telling me they typed up to work on these things and how many expired. I don't think anybody ever knew, but that's what I was told. And some of those.
Well, it took him 2 years to get him out of here.
Henry, what are you doing during these years?
When,
Well, I don't know, when the corner news is 50s and 60s.
He's in his Jeep.
And you're flying, right?
Henry had a Jeep to go around.
The what?
The Jeep.
Jeep,
Yeah, oh,
that
yeah.
little puppy dog.
Oh, yeah. I had a Jeep, Mr. Thorne gave me his Jeep in my junior and senior year. Do you know, I got as many as 7 girls out of Bennett College. They all knew my Jeep. Mr. Thorne had I don't know, some of you people might have remembered the old door bells that they had many years ago. There was a little knob, you pushed it in and went ding dong, and you put it underneath the floorboard in the Jeep. And you stepped on it, and it would go ding dong. Remember the old road that went down to the monument? It's not there anymore, we got that new road now.
Yeah, right.
I used to go down there after school, and I went past what they called the White House, all the girls was in there. I'd ring that bell, and go around the monument, and come back, and there they were, all
Ice cream man.
These Norwich Terriers. She brought a lot of them over from England. And they used these Norwich Terriers for fox hunting. They had a little pocket on the side of the saddle, and they put these little dogs in there, and they would chase the foxes around, and the fox would get in the hole, and then they would take these little terriers out, and they would go down the hole and bring the foxes out, and then they'd continue on with their run. But we also showed them, I showed them down in Westminster, down in New York one year, with these dogs, and I did that for 4 years. And then I went on into the Army afterwards. And I had to give up that Jeep, though, that was a shame. But I got one today, and I still go down around the monument. No girls.
Ghosts.
And Helen, one of the things that you've been involved with a lot, for a long time, right, is the Grange.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about that?
In 1960, Henry and I were honored at the Pleasant Valley Grange. We were for 65 years membership.
65 years.
Yes.
We had a dartball team from the Grange. And my
Yeah.
Jim Russell want to join the dartball team. We said, no, you gotta join the Grange. He joined the Grange, we got married. So that's what I got out of that.
So I want to make sure we have a little time for questions if people have questions. So I think I'll ask you just one more myself here. How do you think Millbrook has changed over the 80, the 90 years that you've been here?
Our
What do
first
you
year,
think?
when we went to school, Helen Merritt and I came, the train tracks were still there. And that's about the first, one of the big changes, no railroad, no trains anymore.
Isn't there a picture of you like on a train trestle or something like that? Did I see that in the archives?
Yes, it's in
Yeah,
there.
is that
Yeah.
Henry or is that you?
And what's interesting about talking about the train, there's one picture, which I just had enlarged, of the Shell gas station, which is Mobile and thing. Susie Langford's here, right here she is, Susie. And honest to God, she had it in her scrapbook. And that's the only picture I ever remember seeing of railroad, the railroad coming. And it was parked right there by the thing. So meanwhile, I took that picture that she had, and I did a nice big enlargement, which I was gonna put on display.
Do people have
But
questions?
anyway, what's interesting about the darn train, we used to get out of the school too early. And I'll be darned if they didn't have a darn train unloading or something, and it's right on, we had to go across the railroad tracks to go to Thorndale. And honest to God, I stood there and waiting for that damn train to go, but the guy came, he said, and Pinky Edmonds, who lived down south of Millbrook. I said, what's the matter with you? Go underneath there. He always went right underneath the trains and went home. I stood there and waited until the train.
That's probably the same.
Chicken.
So do you folks have questions for them, or do you want to talk about your own memories, maybe of the Corner News, or what do you remember? Yeah, Charlie?
I remember ice skating on Thorndale. I'm sure Barbara and Jane Trant and Roger and all the Trants were there. I don't know if Kadings were there. But we were skating on one of those ponds there when the ice was so thin that our weight would push the ice down, and we had a lot of fun skating around watching the ice go down. But then somebody came, maybe the farm manager, and chased us off because it was too dangerous.
Strobel.
Probably Strobel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Strobel. Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions, memories?
I'm gonna tell you something a little bit secret.
All right.
I might get in trouble for this, but I'm gonna tell it anyhow, because I think it's worth telling.
Linda, turn off the camera.
Turn the camera off. Do you, a lot of you people remember good old Dr. Bennett?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
He was a real close friend of mine. Now, I did this, you know, he passed away with cancer. And his last request was to be cremated. And I'm sure some of you people know that I flew for 40 years. I had my own airplane. I flew for the Shriners, for the Shrine Hospital and that. His wife came to me after he passed away and said, Henry, I'd like to ask you a big favor, to take Dr. Bennett's ashes up and fly over Millbrook and let them out. And I did. It's really against the law to do, but I did. I went up there about 6 o'clock at night one night.
Oh, that's lovely.
Shirley and I, his wife, went up and got right over Main Street and killed the motor and opened the window up.
Wow.
Slowed it down about 65 miles an hour and dropped it out. That little trick cost me $5,000. Because if anybody knows anything about the ashes, it's like grit. I
Yeah.
could hear it hitting the vertical stabilizer in the back of the airplane. Glad they get the whole airplane painted. And that was $5,000, but it was worth it from the top down.
And then Dad went outside and swept in front of the store like he always does.
I just wanted to comment on the corner news store. I know what you sold, John and Helen, but it was the heart of the village.
Yes, yes.
You could go in there any time of the day or the evening, I don't remember your hours, John, and there would Marilyn be sitting with that wonderful smile, and John was usually running around doing something, I don't know what he was doing.
Yeah,
But Marilyn was there, and if you needed to talk, if you just needed anything at all, that place was always warm, friendly. No matter how you felt, you always felt better when you left the Corner News. And for that, I would like to thank the Kadings because
In answer to that, I just want to pass on to you today, on the 18th of this Saturday, it will be 1 year that I lost my wife. So this is a kind of refresher.
I'd like to add something.
Thank you.
The warmth there was amazing, because if Mom wasn't there, we had Shirley.
yes,
And Shirley, she was just like part of our whole
Shirley was
family.
there, Laura
Laura
was there,
yeah, it was just,
yeah.
it was a,
It
was a great
that
place
kind
to
of a
grow up.
place.
I was never there, I was always up at the farm, because Johnny,
Hey,
I'm the working
yeah,
son.
yeah, I'm the working daughter. I didn't do the register, I did all the work so Daddy could play.
But it was a great life for me to grow up as Donald Kading, because Dad had a rule, you know, respect our name, respect our family, and work hard, and that's what we all did as a family, and it was all, to this day, we all work together and have a good time at it. And
But it's also wasn't always a place just to pick up the newspapers and everything, it was a place to get news of what was going on.
I call it, the Corner News back then was the Google. It's the school.
Even sent out on the steps in front of that.
Right, yeah.
You know, if anything at all that you get from this meeting with the Kadings, you'll get one thing I hope you understand, that we are a family and we look after each other, going through their families and so forth. And go away with that kind of a thought of family, keep it family. There's been many times we've had misunderstandings and so forth. And it was always my father that said, John, who's telling you this? We call out Henry. Henry, what's the story? Or Helen. Helen was always in the middle all things. That's basically what it's all about. Family. Pass it on to you over and over again. And I think you'll talk to the Italian family that came here from America. They had the same problem I did.
So John and Helen both brought lots of stuff to look at, so I'd encourage you to come up and look at this stuff. I'm sure John.
Yeah.
Speak up.
Oh, okay.
Walter was my brother during one of the most difficult times I've had. In 1986, my grandson Daniel was diagnosed with leukemia, a life-threatening disease. He was just 18 months old. In 1987, he underwent a bone marrow transplant at Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York. His 7-month-old sister was a perfect match for the operation. It was estimated that the operation would cost anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000.
Right over there. Danny, stand up, stand up. Miracle.
This is Danny Russell.
Yeah.
When Stanford Branch heard about it, they set up a trust fund for Daniel to help his family pay for some of the cost. My son said the first bill he got was $27,000, and that was before the operation. He had to be in the hospital in observation for 28 days. Then he had the operation, he had to stay another 28 days. He had to do it. And 22 community groups and organizations from Millbrook and Stanfordville rallied together to help. At one point, the trust fund had collected $37,000. With our prayers answered and the continued effort of the doctors to save his life, the transplant was a success. Bob said that somehow he never got a bill from Sloan Kettering, whether the trust fund had paid it off, and also James Cagney was involved also. He passed away, but his wife set up a charity fund, and they were given, he said he was paying for Bob and Joanne to stay in New York, or time he was there at McDonald House, and also had a limousine that Danny was so proud to ride.
I don't remember it, so.
After Daniel's operation, our family decided to help with the Cancer Society. And we participated in their walkathon in 1992, 93, and 94. We raised over $1,500 for cancer research. We also won the plaque for the families that raised the most money, in all 3 years. That's it.
How many generations of Kading? Are there 3 or 4 here? Yeah. 3 generations.
Well, let's stand up.
Yeah. All the Kading.
Look, you can stand up, you're not that old.
Okay, I have a big announcement to make, everybody. I hope everybody is going to welcome this. I have bought the domain millbrookmemories.com, and I am doing a forever gift, hopefully for generations to come. Daddy's pictures will be on there sharing, the stories will be on there sharing, and to that site will there be a Millbrook Memories store that will have his pictures and other things that will go on print on demand, t-shirts, blankets, pillows, whatever you want. If you want a coffee mug with a corner news store on it to have coffee. And who knows what that joy is going to bring. And they all agree up there that some of the proceeds, after I pay for the website and all the stuff that goes with that, some of the proceeds will go to the Thorn Building. So I don't know how to set that up, so it will be coming into our Millbrook bank account, Millbrook Memories bank account, but when that comes from that, a portion of that, when that ever happens, whatever's gonna happen over there, they want that money to be there for them, so. Also, Facebook page with a opt-in for a newsletter, so please put your email and your name, and I will keep you updated through emails of when this store opens and what I come across of what I can do with Dad's pictures. I did find out, because I'm a coloring addict, I found out a store that I could actually take Dad's pictures and make it an adult coloring book, and we could have Millbrook coloring books. So, if that's exciting, but there's going to be all kinds of things out there. So.
Now, I don't know whether you remember, but last year they made Marilyn's donations for her, on her death, to go to the Millbrook Historical Society, and it was to be used to preserve John's pictures. We haven't used that, so if we can help you with the cost of doing this, I am assuming that the rest of the society will all
So
agree
moved.
that. All right, because that will be of help, and we haven't used that money, and that's what it's for, so we'll use it in that way. Does everybody agree?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But please, can I open up too? Where my dad lives, please, if you see the green truck there, knock on his door and go visit with him and look at those pictures. He loves showing his pictures.
We have his pictures all on CDs right now, and so that they are all available, and we haven't organized them yet. We're still trying to figure out how to do the best way to do that. But, so if anybody has expertise in that, please let us know. All right? Yes.
One last thing I'd like to hear from John. The 33-year disappearance of a certain...
Yes. I gotta tell you the story about that.
There he goes.
Thank you again. Let me tell you quickly the story. I had the North Breeze Farm, which is next to the bowling alley. And I never got there, and I never had a sign up. And I went to Peter Wynn, and I had a beautiful picture of a horned doors. That's the sheep that I had. They go back to 1700s, they were one of the oldest breeds.
But wait a minute, we
And
bought
what
the
was
first corn doors
interesting
from
about
Uncle
it-
Henry, so
Yes.
he's the start of everything.
Yes, okay. And Johnny got a better one.
So anyway,
Let's not get it.
Peter made this beautiful 4-foot by 3-foot sheep, North Breeze Farm, Millbrook, New York. And I had it on a post right in front of my house in 44. And I don't think it was there 2 months, maybe 3 months. And I went out, all that stood there was the post. All the sign was still there. And I said, damn it, somebody stole this. So, for 30 years, every time I went to a show, I figured somebody's got that and they changed the name and never showed up. Good old Mr.
O'Shea.
Shea. He wrote the article in the Millbrook Roundtable column. And he says it was funny that him and his wife were upstate New York, and his wife was looking at jewelry, and he went across the street to another antique store, and there stands a beautiful sheep with North Breeze Farm, Millbrook, New York.
We found it. Yep, we found it.
Wow.
I remember that story, but you're the guy who did it.
Yes, we did it.
He said, what's that sign?
Wow.
So he went to the owner of that antique store and says to the guy, where'd that sign come from? Oh, he got that in Pleasant Valley. From Mr. Traver. Now, Mr. Traver is one of our good friends and everything. And I immediately go to Traver. I said, Mr. Traver, how come? No, they never came to our thing. I would have called you, you know. That's right. So, sure enough, I went to the state police. And they went to investigate the guy up there upstate. And the guy said, oh no, that sign is on consignment from a lady in Connecticut. Oh. So the state police find out, they go to the lady's house. And she says, yeah, she bought it from another dealer. And that's why they had it.
Wow.
And then he, in turn, tells them it belongs to me. Sure enough, the woman calls me and says, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to bring it to you till the end of the month, because I got 2 shows coming up. And then sure enough, they came at the end of July, and they brought a sign and everything. It was a wonderful deal. It wasn't outside, it was in somebody's attic.
So Dad, so who ended up stealing it from the get-go?
Never found out.
Never found out.
Never found out who did.
I don't know how much she paid for that.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah, where is the sign now?
It's in the town.
Oh, it's in his house, oh,
So this has been a great,
Yeah, in the living room.
so let's thank the Kading. Over here, take a look at some of this stuff, right?
Such an interesting story.
What we'd like to say is that Helen worked for many years in the Millbrook Post Office.
Right.
So maybe she has some stories to tell about working at the post office.
Oh, yeah.
We came in one morning, a whole bunch of men there. What are they doing here? And they're inspectors. They're expecting somebody in Millbrook to pick up a package that was mailed from California with some drugs in it. So I said, who's gonna give the guy the package? Oh, Jay's a good friend of him. Jay, you take it and give him the package. Well, hello, I'm not gonna mention their name. How are you, Logan? You got a package? Yeah. Jay gave me the package, out the door he went. Comes up, we had him in the house, we had him in the post office and outside.
How long did you work in the postal?
22 years.
Oh.
Yeah, one night, and I left work and the boss says, Helen, Monday you report Stanfordville. I said, why? He said, you're gonna be officer in charge. The Stanfordville postmaster was retired. I worked there 6 months, and they finally appointed somebody else.
That was Jay's thing?
Oh, we have 2 generations. I worked for the post office, and my son is a postmaster at Stanfordville. We had my grandfather delivered mail in Germany, and his son also worked for the post office.
All right, well, let's take a look at some of the stuff over here and thank the Kadings again.